everybody, welcome to the assessment part of the process and issuing of a draft plan. My name is Lindsay Critchlow from Sen Education for All, and I'll be presenting today's webinar. About us. I am a Sen advocate. I've got 18 years of personal experience and 4 years of professional experience in the Sen sector. I've got three wonderfully neurodivergent boys, all have EHCPs. Two of them I secured specialists through tribunal for them. I've completed all 3 levels of EHC law training and have previously worked for an advocacy organisation. I also work with Laura Morris, who's also a SEND advocate. She's got 3 wonderfully neurodivergent children as well, who all have EHCPs. Her eldest is now 22 and has benefited from it for many years. Her other 2 children, she's fought tirelessly to ensure that they're appropriate for their needs, and she's gone on to appeal for both children's secure placements in specialists. She also, in addition to her advocacy work, has completed all EHC Sen law courses, and she does like to expand her knowledge by participating in any Sen courses or training courses that do come up. We are, as a company, fully insured. We both have DBS checks and we are registered with the RCO, and we are continuously doing CPD to ensure that we further ourselves and ensure that we're up to date with recent knowledge. So you've got a yes to assess you 6 weeks after you submitted your request for an education healthcare needs assessment, and the local authority have informed you that they agreed to conduct an EHC, an education healthcare needs assessment. And we're going to talk through now what is going to happen through that process. So what happens during an assessment? So Sen Regulation 6 of the 2014 regulations sets out what the local authority have to do, what information and advice they have to seek out when they are doing a needs assessment. So they have to ask yourself, so your child's parents or the young person themselves for their views and their wishes. They have to ask educational advice and information, including input from the head teacher or principal of the school or post-16 institution. If not available, insights from someone with experience teaching children or young children with special educational needs or knowledge of the different provisions required to meet various needs. If the child or young person is not currently enrolled in a school or institution and advice cannot be obtained as per subparagraph, a person responsible for educational provision. So basically, if they're not in school, it's anybody that that is supporting the child, whether that be yourself or a tutor, etc. If any parent or the child or young person is an active member of the Magistrates Armed Forces, advice from the Secretary of State for Defence. They also need to seek out medical advice and information from a healthcare professional designated by the responsible commissioning body. They also need to seek out advice from psychological advice and information from an educational psychologist. So every single needs assessment must have an educational psychologist. Advice and information relating to social care, input from any individuals deemed appropriate by the local authority. For children or young people in or beyond year 9, advice and information pertaining to provisions that aid in preparation for adulthood and independent living, and advice and information from any persons responsibly requested by the child's parent or young person for the local authority to consult. So what that means is basically if there are identifying needs like in speech and language, or occupational therapy, or physio, or CAMS, if you request to the local authority stating they have these needs, or the school have said this, or the EP have said that, you are requesting a full-on assessment in this area, that would be deemed reasonable. So then they should then go and seek out advice and information from that person or that department. Sen Regulation 6. And we've just done that. For some reason, I've got 2 of those. Apologies. Apologies, we've got 2 of them. We don't need that again. So what must be taken into consideration when assessment is ongoing? So SEN regulation sets out what must be taken into consideration when the local authority are actually doing the needs assessment. So they must consult with the child and their parent or the young person, taking into account their views, wishes and feelings. They must consider any information submitted to the local authority by or at the request of the child, their parent or the young person. They must evaluate the information and advice gathered in accordance with Regulation 6.1. They must engage with the child or their parent or the young person to ensure their active participation in discussions, and they must minimise disruption for the child, their parent, the young person, and their family. So what you'll note from here is it says consider any information. It doesn't say they have to use it or include it. It just says they have to consider. So duties to cooperate. This is for other services. So when the local, this is regulation 8 of the SEN regulation. So when a local authority is seeking assistance of a body to secure an EHC needs assessment as mandated by Section 31 of the Children's and Families Act, that body is required to respond to the request within 6 weeks from the date of receipt. So like speech and language, CAMS, occupational therapy, physio, paediatricians, all them kinds of people, they have a duty to cooperate and provide advice and information within 6 weeks. A body is not obligated to meet the 6 weeks time frame mentioned in paragraph 1 if compliance is impractical due to the following circumstances: exceptional situations impacting the child, their parent, or the young person during that 6 week duration; the child, their parent, or the young person being absent from the authority's area for a continuous period of no less than 4 weeks within that 6 week time frame; the child or young person missing an appointment for an examination or test scheduled by the body during that 6 week period. If they're saying stuff like there's a waiting list, etc., the local authority should be pressing that body, that commissioning group, I can't remember what it's called now, but they should be pressing the speech therapist or the OT service or CAMS service, etc., to ensure that they are within that 6 week period. And if they're not, want to know why. Saying stuff like they're on a waiting list is not advice and information within that 6 week period, and saying that they're not known to service is not advice and information within that 6 week period. So the local authority should be pushing that and challenging it. Decisions not to issue an EHCP. So when we get to week 16, by week 16, you should have being told whether they are or aren't going to issue an EHCP. Now, if they decide not to issue an EHCP, Regulation 10 states what they must do. So if after conducting the needs assessment, local authority determines that it is unnecessary to provide special education support for a child or young person through an EHC plan, they must issue the notification required by Section 36(9) of the Children's and Families Act as soon as possible, and no longer than 16 weeks after receiving a request for an EHC needs assessment. So that 16-week point is started at the date that you actually put the request in for a needs assessment, not when they decided to do the assessment. As stated in Section 36(1) of the Children's and Families Act, or after the local authority takes responsibility for the child or young person under Section 24 of the Children's and Families Act. The local authority must also inform the responsible commissioning body and the involved notified under Regulations 4, 2C or D of the Children's and Families Act. When notifying the parent of a child or the young person in accordance with paragraph 1. So if they're going to tell you that they are not going to be issuing a plan, the local authority must provide them with the information regarding your right to appeal the decision, the time limits for submitting an appeal, the mediation information in Regulation 32, and the availability of disagreement resolution services, and information and advice concerning issues relating to the special educational needs of children and young people. So what they have to do is provide you with the final letter to state their decision, which must give you all your information about appealing. They must also give you all the information to contact the mediation company, decide whether you're going to go to mediation or not. If you do decide you want to mediate, they must provide a date within 30 days for a meeting for the mediation. If they don't, then you must get the mediation company must send you a mediation certificate. If you decide that you don't want to mediate and you don't want a mediation meeting because you don't feel it's going to be any good, then you can say, you know your rights to mediation. I don't believe it's going to help me. Please send me a mediation certificate, and that mediation company will do that. So Regulation 10 continued. One second. Oh yeah. So this is talking about when the local authority has to comply with time limits. The local authority is not required to adhere to the time limit mentioned in paragraph 1 if it is impractical for the following reasons. The authority has sought advice from their teacher or principal of a school or post-16 institution during a period that starts what? So basically, this states during the summer holidays they can add an additional 4 weeks onto the timelines because the school has been closed for a continuous period of at least 4 weeks and ends 1 week before it reopens, or pardon me. And the same again, anybody else that they've requested advice and information, if that institution is closed for a contiguous period of 4 weeks, they can have 4 weeks on. And then it goes on about the circumstances of the parents not being available or outside of the timeframes or outside of the local authority for a continuous period of at least 4 weeks. Then all of this means that they can add an additional 4 weeks onto that timeframe. Decision if they decide to issue a plan. So about week 16, the local authority is required to notify you regarding the issuance of a draft plan. Regulation 11 states what the local authority must do if they decide that they are going to issue a plan. So in the process of preparing a child or young person's EHC plan, the local authority must take into account the evidence gathered during the EHC needs assessment and consider the most effective ways to achieve the desired outcomes for the child or young person. As you can see, when they are drafting the EHCP plan, the law does not say that they have to include everything. Yes, they need to have good reason why they're not going to include stuff, but it's not explicit enough. So what we often kind of find is that plans that are issued are not fit for purpose, and there's lots of information that is actually missing from the advice and the information stated. But it's not clear enough in law to state that they must include everything. It's just they've got to take into account that information and consider the best ways to meet the child's needs. Obviously, we all know that's not how they work most often than not. It's not about the best way to meet the child's needs. It often comes down to money. And that is where we come up to the issuing of a draft plan. We can help through the process if the local authority are late, delayed, any complaints, any advice you need, please just reach out to us. You can check out what we offer on educationforall.uk or email us at hello@educationforall.uk. Our next webinar that I will be recording and uploading will be about checking a draft plan and going through it to make sure that it is lawful and it is suitable for the child's needs. So yeah, but thank you for joining me today and listening to our webinar on what happens during the EHC needs assessment process. Thank you. Bye.